Hi guys, Joe here, and welcome back to 750 Gaming. In this one we'll return to the topic of the Inquisition, my Red Hunters army, and a certain lady by the name of Katarina Greyfax. Okay, so if you've seen any of my other videos in my Red Hunters playlist, you'll have seen how much I developed my army over the end of 9th edition and over the course of 10th edition to engage with as much inquisitorial fluff as I can muster. Where we left that army last time was at around 1,000 points, leaning towards the Ordo Xenos with some Deathwatch veterans requisitioned in for good measure. But the more I thought about it and pressed into the lore and looked at my other armies for complementing thematics, I feel it's probably more appropriate to shift this army towards the Ordo Hereticus, and it certainly makes a bit more sense for the Red Hunters chapter and lore in general to do so. So, with that in mind, I decided to ditch the Ordo Xenos from this army, and I'll discuss how I rebalance the main Astartes portion in a little bit and how I reckon it's going to play out on the table. But first up, let's talk about the Queen of the Ordo Hereticus herself. Now, bear in mind that's not an actual official title in any way, shape or form, but yes, let's talk about Katarina Greyfax. Now, I really enjoy the lore surrounding Greyfax, particularly the post-Fall of Cadia stuff. Segue here, the Fall of Cadia is a pretty terribly written piece of literature as novels go. Now, I'm clearly not a literary critic, but my degree, or major if you will, was in English Lit, and for my sins I ended up writing my dissertation on the literary merits of Harry Potter, so, you know, go figure. But much like how I do enjoy Harry Potter, I didn't not enjoy the Fall of Cadia. They're just not well-written books. I mean, the amount of times that the guy uses the word vitae when he could just say blood, or, you know, his overuse of the word empiric, sometimes multiple times in the same passage, and I know that they are 40k-ish words with particular meanings and connotations, etc., but it just feels like he's, learnt a new fancy word and wants to use it as much as he can whilst forgetting every other noun or adjective. But right, yes, anyway, back to Kat. I think there's a real human quality to her character. She starts off really set in her ways as a full-on Puritan Inquisitor, the Greyfax from many, many years ago before Trazyn the Infinite trapped her in stasis in his museum of fun collectibles, because we don't all have them. That's a pretty cool origin story, by the way. But to Kat, anything that looks like witchcraft or magic, or essentially looks unhuman and not normal, well, it must be heresy and it requires purging. Despite the fact, of course, that she herself is a psyker. But she's the good kind of psyker. The Emperor anointed her with such power to seek out the bad psykers, and there's nothing hypocritical about it at all. She is justified and sanctified and holy as thou, whereas everyone else is not. Wonderful. But because of this, she hates the Adepta Sororitas with a passion for their faith and worship of Saint Celestine, who can't possibly be good. None of that can. Celestine can't possibly be filled with Emperor of Mankind goodness. No, there's no way that she is an Emperor-ordained miracle because Katarina Greyfax doesn't know about it and wasn't told about it. So Celestine must be bad witchcraft, and an abomination from the warp, and the Adepta Sororitas are all heretical mugs for believing and following her. Yeah, you go girl, you abhor that damned witch. Except, of course, Celestine then leads everyone to safety and helps with Bobby Gorilla Man's resurrection, and slowly but surely Kat Greyfax's hardline Puritan principles and walls start to come down, and she recognises that Celestine is good magic after all, and they make friends in a lovely redemption arc. And then the Greyfax goes off with the Grey Knights hunting for a zombie Inquisitor and his holy relics, and it's all good fun, except here's a significant oversight. Despite the fact that Greyfax spends an inordinate part of her lore with said Grey Knights, and it's a pretty important storyline with regards to the Indomitus Crusade, in the rules of that really popular tabletop game that's so firmly rooted in the lore, can you attach Inquisitor Katarina Greyfax to a squad of Grey Knight Terminators? Of course you can't. Why would Games Workshop allow you to do that? That's not a sensible thematic idea at all. So, instead, I went down the let's make up our own headcanon for what Kat did next route, now that she's seemingly all busy mates with Celestine and the Adeptus Sororitas and all. And considering I've been wanting to do something with the nuns with guns for a while, I thought this was a great opportunity to kill a few birds with one swipe of the credit card. So I nabbed a shabby-ish Sisters of Battle squad off of the eBay machine for pennies and gave them a bit of a glow up, and I got Kat herself new on sprue for not a lot more extra dollar. Great, I thought to myself. Kat can attach to the Sororitas and she's got herself a nice little Ordo Hereticus bodyguard going on. But I was still going to be a few points short with this Red Hunters army as a whole when it was all said and done, so instead of adding yet more Space Marines to my ever-growing collection, yes, I have a problem, you probably do too. Anyway, when scouring the eBay machine once more, I found and acquired myself a Sororitas Rhino. Yes, I did. And man does they look cool, all blinged out in Inquisitional fleur-de-lis. And you never know, it might actually give the girls a bit more of a chance on the tabletop too. Let's be honest, I don't expect them to actually last all that long or do a lot in a game. That's what those chaps in red power armour are really for. Kat and her crew are just there for narrative, novelty, rule of cool value, and let's be honest, that's what I'm really here for anyway. That's the whole point. So how does this lot fit into that Red Hunters army proper? Well, we left my weird and wonderful mismatched Astartes at around 1,000 points, as I said, as it was. It's tricky to keep track with what is and what was with the amount of rebalancing G-dubs do these days, but it was around 1,000 points at one point over the course of 10th edition. But, as it is, we had a kit bash captain who looks a bit like a Death Watch Watchmaster, and he was leading a squad of 5 intercessors. We had a nondescript homebrew Inquisitor, which is still one of the coolest things I've made actually, to be honest, and he led another bunch of intercessors because he's able to attach to battle line infantry. And then we had the Death Watch vets with thunderhammers and a few other kit bash bits and bobs. We had some eliminators, because if you're on the hunt for heretics then you need your snipers, naturally. And we also had some hellblasters, with an attached apothecary for the succinctly titled Shoot Again on Hazardous Supercharged Death Only to be Resurrected to Rinse and Repeat combo. That was tasty. Oh, and for creative reasons I had some infiltrators painted in Alpha Legion blue and led by a kit-bashed Phobos Lieutenant Librarian guy who looked a little bit like Cypher. Cypharius, if you will. It was a big fat soup, and it was fun, but we can do better. So on the basis that the Red Hunters are an Astartes chapter requisitional themselves by the forces of the Inquisition, I wanted to lean that way a little bit more. We'll keep our intercessors and we'll keep our captain, and he might as well keep his Death Watch coloured pauldron and arm. I like to think he did actually serve some time as a Watchmaster on secondment in the Ordo Xenos before, coming back to his parent chapter later on and stuff. And while we're keeping him, we'll yoink out some of those other tabarded Sternguard Death Watch vets who are wielding just the bolt rifles, and they can each be promoted to lieutenant to lead a squad. I'm going to be ditching my Hellblaster cheat codes here, and also my Alpha Legion chaps. But don't worry, they'll all get shuffled around to some other project somewhere, and if I can pick up some suppressors proper at some point, then I'll go full Strike Team Solarian Combat Patrol with the loyally ambivalent blue guys. But instead, I'll replace them all with a squad of Terminators. As opposed to those mad psychic silver dudes. But they will be led by a Termi Librarian at least. I figured this requisition force included some guys from the first company for an extra bit of muscle, and whilst we were at it, we also needed someone actually properly psychic in the army as well. We ditched that sort of idea when we went all Death Watchy, but considering the Red Hunters, in the lore, regularly mind wipe their rank and file when they come into contact with warp monstrosities and the like, it still made fluffy sense to include a librarian. in this cohort. So there he is. And that's the Astartes portion sorted. And once we've chucked a few battlefield upgrades on it, it's around 750 points, which is happy days for me. If I chuck in Cat and the sisters and their chariot, we're going close to 1,000. And close is good enough for me. So yeah, on the table then, we've got those intercessor squads, both with the lieutenants and one with Captain Watchmaster 2, and those are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting and objective securing. Those Terminators and the Librarian are intended to just deep strike in at some point and become an immovable blob in a particularly strategic location. And then we've got the girls riding around in a Rhino causing an annoyance, whilst the limbs take pot shots at whoever needs a double tap to the head from afar. It's a pretty nicely balanced 1,000 point heretic hunting bundle of fun, and I can see them fighting pretty much all my other armies, heretic or otherwise. You know they'll take on my Emperor's children. Like, that's a given. Will they have a pop at my Black Templars? Well, it's more than likely actually that the Black Templars will take a pop at them, to be honest. Cat might have softened, but there's still no such thing as a good witch for the heirs of Sigismund. What about those female Space Wolf abominations of mine? Because the Inquisition and the Red Hunters didn't have enough beef with the Space Wolves as it was. Now there are lady Space Marines, and you better believe that that's heresy worthy of a good purge. To be honest, I don't have a good reason as to why they'd take on my White Scars, but I'm sure I could come up with something narrative in my headcanon. But yeah, it's all good fun. And that's the point. It is. Warhammer economics is insane at the moment. Perhaps more so than it's ever been. And my mantra here is that life is busy and plastic ain't cheap, so I'm always looking forward to getting as much fluffy fun and enjoyment out of as little as possible by spending as little as possible. I managed to snaffle these Ordo Hereticus extras for around 50 quid in total on eBay. The sisters needed a lot of work, but considering that Cat and the Rhino were actually new on sprue, it was a bit of a dream. And after I did the maths to rework out what I'd spent on the rest of this army, I figured it was a pretty tabletop ready usable 1,000 point army for around 130 quid in total, and that's sort of considering inflation and all of that as well, which is pretty good in my book. Oh, and did I mention that it's really fun and cool? In my opinion, anyway. Hit that like button if you agree. But tell me what you think. Do you prefer fluff on the tabletop or ruthless efficiency? What's your favourite bit of lore or character you've built into your armies? Let me know in the comment section below. I always enjoy reading through your thoughts, the good, the bad and the laughable. And as ever, this is just an extension to my hobby fun rather than something I do for a living. But that being said, if you fancy tipping the busker, then I've got me a buy me a coffee page set up and I'll be eternally in your debt to the sum of a pot of paint if you could help me out. Hopefully I'll see you again next time. But for now, thanks for watching.
Let's go!
Yes, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, then do hit like and give me a comment below. I don't do this to pay my bills, it's just for fun without a regular release schedule or anything. So hit subscribe to catch these videos when I do them, or visit my Instagram for my hobbying updates. My content isn't monetized, I have no Patreon, but if you want to tip the busker by chucking some pennies in the digital hat, then I have a buy me a coffee thing set up and I'll be very grateful. See you next time.